Welcome the night and its dreams. Long ago, young Callow Boffin, a curious hobbit lad, wandered further than he should have on a misty autumn night. The fields were cloaked in silver fog, and the familiar Shire paths felt strange and eerie. Callow carried his lantern, its golden light bobbing like a firefly. But suddenly, the lantern flickered and went out. As the silence grew heavier, Callow heard faint singing, soft, lilting, and otherworldly. Intrigued and a little afraid, he followed the sound. It led him to the old forest's edge, where the trees loomed like ancient sentinels. There, by a moonlit pool, Callow saw her, a tall, willowy figure draped in starlight. She was an elf, though her face was shadowed by a veil. In her hands, she held a harp that shimmered like morning dew. "Why do you wander here, little hobbit?" she asked, her voice as clear as a mountain spring. Callow stammered. "I heard your song. It was beautiful. Who are you?" "I am Nelith of Linden," she replied, "and this pool is my haven, far from the sorrows of the world. But few mortals ever find it. Perhaps you were meant to." Nelith listened as Callow spoke of his simple life in the Shire, of apple orchards, festival dances, and the comforting smell of fresh-baked bread. His innocence and joy touched her heart. As dawn broke, she reached into her harp and drew forth a tiny, glowing gem. "This is the Starfire Gem," she said. "It carries a fragment of starlight, meant to guide you through the darkest nights. But be warned, its light fades if used selfishly." Callow accepted the gem with trembling hands, promising to guard it well. Years later, the Shire faced an unexpected threat, bands of goblins creeping in from the north. The Shire folk, though brave, were ill-prepared to face such foes. It was then that Callow remembered the Starfire Gem. Gathering his courage, he climbed to the top of the Greenfields Hill, where he raised the gem high. Its light blazed like the dawn, scattering the goblins in fear and confusion. The hobbits rallied, driving the intruders away. The Shire was safe again, and Callow's name was sung in quiet tavern songs. Yet the Starfire Gem, true to Nelith's warning, faded until it was no more than a clear stone. Callow kept it as a memory of the night he met an elf and carried the light of the stars. Years later, as an old hobbit, he passed the gem to his granddaughter, Melwyn. "Keep it," he told her, "and remember that even the smallest of us can hold the greatest light." Epilogue. A tale worth telling. Melwyn closed the book and gazed at the clear stone sitting on her mantle. Outside, the Shire was bathed in moonlight. She smiled, knowing that some tales, though forgotten by most, would always live on in the hearts of hobbits. And as she whispered a good night to the flickering flames, she thought she heard the faintest echo of a harp song on the wind. A whisper of new beginnings. As Melwyn drifted into sleep that night, the old tales seemed to weave into her dreams. The warmth of the fire dimmed, and she found herself standing in a familiar yet otherworldly Shire. The hills glowed faintly silver, and the stars above seemed closer, almost within reach. Before her stood a path she had never noticed before, winding and narrow, lined with wildflowers that shimmered with an inner light. A soft breeze carried the sound of a harp, faint and alluring. Melwyn hesitated, but the sound of the harp stirred something deep within her. She followed the path, the grass cool under her bare feet. As she walked, the Shire around her changed, becoming older, wilder, as though she were stepping back into a forgotten age. At the path's end, she came upon a glade bathed in pale moonlight. There, beneath a great willow, sat a figure cloaked in starlight. Though her face was veiled, Melwyn somehow knew it was Nelith. "You carry the Starfire's memory," Nelith said, her voice soft yet resonant. "Do you know why?" Melwyn held the clear stone in her hand, its surface cool and smooth. "My grandfather said it was to remind us that light can come from the smallest of us. Is there more to it?" Nelith smiled faintly. "The gem chose him, and now it chooses you. The light it once held was not only for the Shire, but for a greater purpose yet to come. Will you bear it as he did?" The clear stone in Melwyn's hand began to glow faintly, as if it had heard Nelith's words. It warmed in her palm, and the glow grew stronger, first soft as candlelight, then bright as a star. As the glade filled with its radiance, Melwyn felt a surge of courage and peace unlike anything she'd ever known. The world around her seemed to hold its breath, as though waiting for her answer. "I will," Melwyn whispered, her voice steady. "If I can help, I will." Nelith reached out and placed a slender hand over Melwin's. Then the Starfire is yours, and your journey begins. But take heart, it is not a journey you must walk alone. When Melwin awoke, the hearth fire had burned low, and the first light of dawn crept into her cozy hobbit hole. Yet the stone in her hand still glowed faintly, its light pulsing like a heartbeat. She knew what she had to do. Gathering a small pack, she filled it with essentials, a few seed cakes, a flask of tea, and her grandmother's journal. But she would not journey alone. Melwin visited her closest friends, Jory, a nimble hobbit skilled with maps, and Tilda, whose quick wit and steady hand made her a favorite among the Shire's children. Though skeptical at first, they too felt the pull of the Starfire's light. As the sun rose higher, the three hobbits stood at the edge of the East Farthing woods, their small figures dwarfed by the towering oaks. Melwin held the glowing stone aloft, its light steady and strong. "We may be small," she said, her voice trembling yet determined, "but the Shire has always taught us that small things can make the greatest difference." With that, they stepped beyond the borders of the Shire, into the wide and unknown world. The road ahead was uncertain, but the light of the Starfire guided them, promising adventure, trials, and the chance to keep the tales of hobbits alive in the songs of Middle-earth. And far away, in the hidden glades of Lindon, Nelith played her harp once more, her song carrying on the wind, a blessing for the small feet that would tread the great road. The first days of their journey were filled with a strange mix of wonder and unease. Jory marveled at the way the land changed beyond the Shire. Rolling hills gave way to jagged cliffs, and familiar scents of honeysuckle and clover were replaced by the crisp tang of pine and the faint musk of damp earth. But as they ventured further east, the woods grew darker. The trees were ancient and gnarled, their branches knitting together to block out the sun. Whispers seemed to trail behind them, faint murmurs carried on the wind. One night, as they made camp near a stream, Tilda frowned at the shadows flickering beyond the firelight. "Do you hear that?" she whispered. Jory paused, his map unrolled across his knees. "What?" "Footsteps," Tilda said, gripping her walking stick tightly. Melwin held the Starfire Gem aloft, its glow, faint until now, brightened instantly, casting the shadows into stark relief. At the edge of the light stood a figure, tall, cloaked, and unmoving. "Who goes there?" Melwin called, her voice shaking but steady enough. The figure stepped forward, lowering its hood to reveal a weathered face framed by strands of silver hair. An elf, though not like the fair beams of song. His eyes were sharp and weary, and his cloak was patched and worn. "My name is Reinar," he said, bowing slightly. "I mean you no harm, but your light has drawn me here. It is rare to see such a thing in these lands." Melwin hesitated. "What do you know of this light?" Reinar studied the gem in her hand. "More than you might guess. That stone is a fragment of Gil Estel, the Star of High Hope. It was fashioned in the ancient days to guide the lost and bring courage to the fearful, yet its power is waning." "We noticed," Jory muttered. "It only shines bright when we really need it." "That is no fault of the gem," Reinar replied. "Its light depends on the hearts of those who bear it. If you falter, so too will it." Reinar's words unsettled the hobbits, but they pressed on. With the elf as their guide, they moved through the dark woods more swiftly. Yet even Reinar could not protect them from all that lurked in the wild. One evening, as they reached a ruined stone bridge, the air grew cold and still. A low growl rumbled from the shadows beneath the arch. From the darkness emerged a warg, its yellow eyes gleaming with malice. Jory froze, his map slipping from his hands. Tilda stepped in front of him, her walking stick raised, though her hands trembled. "Stand your ground," Reinar commanded, drawing a slender blade that glimmered faintly in the dim light. Melwin clutched the Starfire Gem. "Please," she whispered to it, "we need your light." The gem's glow burst forth, flooding the clearing with radiant light. The warg hesitated, snarling and shielding its eyes. In that moment of distraction, Reinar struck. His blade flashed, and the beast fell with a final, guttural cry. That night, as they rested by the safety of a high hill, Melwin stared at the gem in her hand. "I'm not sure I can do this," she admitted. "I'm just a hobbit. This light, this journey, it feels so much bigger than me." Reinar looked at her, his expression softening. "The great tales always feel too large for those within them, but that is how they are meant to be. Your courage is not in knowing what lies ahead, it is in stepping forward despite not knowing. Tilda leaned over and nudged Melwyn's arm. Besides, she said with a grin, it's not just you. You've got us, remember? And me, Renar added, though my path may part from yours before long. Their journey soon led them to the foothills of the Misty Mountains, where a narrow path wound upward toward Rivendell. Melwyn had only heard of the hidden elven haven in old songs. Yet as they approached, she felt the air grow lighter, filled with the scent of blooming flowers and the sound of distant waterfalls. When they finally stood before the gates of Rivendell, Melwyn's heart swelled. She felt for the first time that she was part of something far greater than the borders of the Shire. The elves welcomed them, their eyes lingering on the Starfire Gem. Its light has not been seen in many an age, one said, and it comes at a time when Middle-earth is once again in need of such courage. That evening, in the halls of Rivendell, Melwyn and her companions shared their tale. As the elves sang songs of hope and strength, Melwyn realized that the Shire's quiet beauty, its small joys, and its unyielding spirit were now part of a much greater story. And as she held the Starfire Gem, its light flickering like a heartbeat, she knew that her journey was far from over, but her courage, small and unassuming, would carry her through the darkest nights ahead. Far away, the winds carried her story back to the Shire, where it would one day become another tale to be whispered by the hearth. A story of small hands, brave hearts, and a light that never truly fades. The journey beyond Rivendell was fraught with new perils. The elves had warned them of treacherous lands, but no warning could prepare the hobbits for the sight of the Grey Chasm. Once a sturdy bridge had spanned it, but now only jagged stone pillars remained, their edges crumbling into the abyss below. Renar examined the remnants. This chasm was created in a battle long forgotten. We'll need to cross carefully. Tilda frowned. Carefully? There's barely a path. Melwyn stepped forward, clutching the Starfire Gem. Its light revealed a faint outline of stepping stones leading across. The way is there, she said, though her voice trembled, but we must trust the light. With Renar leading and Melwyn holding the gem aloft, they began their crossing. The wind howled, threatening to unsteady them, but step by step, they made their way. It was only as they reached the other side that Melwyn realized her knees were shaking. Their next challenge was the Forest of Whispering Leaves, an ancient wood where the trees seemed alive with their own voices. Every step they took was accompanied by rustling whispers, as though unseen watchers discussed their every move. Jory stopped abruptly. Did anyone hear that? What now? Tilda groaned. I heard my mother's voice, Jory said, his face pale. She was calling my name. Runar frowned. This forest plays tricks. It speaks to your deepest fears and longings. Do not stray from the path, no matter what you hear. The whispers grew louder, filling Melwyn's ears with familiar voices. Her grandfather, her parents, and even her own younger self. They spoke of comfort, safety, and the warmth of home. For a moment, she felt an overwhelming urge to turn back. But the Starfire Gem glowed brighter, cutting through the illusions. With a deep breath, Melwyn led them forward, refusing to look back. Emerging from the forest, they found themselves on an open plain under a starry sky. The land was eerily quiet, the grass damp with dew. As dawn broke, the first light revealed distant figures, tall, unmoving shapes on the horizon. What are they? Tilda asked, her voice hushed. The Watchers, Renar said grimly. Statues left by a forgotten kingdom to guard this land. They are stone by day, but by night. His voice trailed off, and Melwyn shuddered. The group pressed on, but as the sun dipped below the horizon, the statues seemed to shift. Stone turned to flesh, and glowing eyes followed their every move. The Starfire Gem burned brightly, holding the Watchers at bay as the hobbits quickened their pace. By the time they reached the far edge of the plain, the first rays of dawn saved them from the Watchers' grasp. Their path brought them to a great stone crossroads, where a weathered signpost pointed in 3 directions. One path led toward a distant mountain range, the second toward a vast marshland, and the third back toward the Shire. We can't go back, Melwyn said, though her voice wavered as she gazed at the familiar direction. Renar pointed toward the mountains. The light will be needed there. The marshes are treacherous, and they hold little but death. Jory hesitated, staring at the marshland path. But what if someone there needs help? Could we just leave them? The group debated long into the evening, but it was the Starfire Gem that made the decision. Its light grew brighter when pointed toward the mountains, as though urging them forward. With heavy hearts, they left the marshes behind. As they ascended the mountain path, the air grew colder and thinner. They encountered deep caves carved into the rock, their walls glistening with crystals that reflected the Starfire Gem's light in dazzling patterns. In one such cave, they found an inscription in an ancient tongue. Runar translated, "Here lies a shard of Gil-Estel, the star of high hope. Those who carry it must bear its burden with courage and wisdom." Melwyn felt the weight of the gem in her hand. "A burden," she whispered. "It is no small thing to carry light into darkness," Runar said. "But that is what makes it worth carrying." As they rested in the cave that night, the gem's light seemed to grow warmer, as though it sensed their resolve. For the first time in days, Melwyn felt a quiet peace, knowing that their journey, though perilous, was guided by a purpose greater than themselves. The road ahead promised even greater challenges, but the hobbits and their elven guide pressed on, their hearts steady and the Starfire Gem shining bright against the encroaching shadows.